Well, here we go for week 48. So for our reading this week, we finished the book of 2 Corinthians, and then we read through Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and then we get halfway through Colossians. Now, for this video, I want to touch on two things, one from Galatians and the other from Colossians. Now, when we get into the book of Galatians, you're going to notice pretty quick that Paul is fired up. And the reason that he is so upset is because these Galatian believers are adding to the gospel. See, what has taken place is that false teachers have come in and they're basically saying to follow Christ, to be a believer, it's Jesus plus whatever. So for them, it was Jesus plus circumcision or Jesus plus observing the law, such as the ceremonial parts of the law. And so Paul, he gets so upset about this because really this is the heart of the gospel, that we are justified by faith alone through Christ alone, that we don't add to the gospel. And this is important for us to remember because really the default position of the human heart is to really go back and drift into earning our salvation. So what makes Christianity unique, I find this fascinating, is when we see all the different major world religions, they're all works-based. And so they may have a different idea of what heaven is or paradise is, but again, it's works-based. So it's do, and then you're accepted. Well, Christianity reverses that. We've been accepted because of what Christ has done for us, and now we do. And we don't do to earn our salvation or to keep our salvation. No, we do because we now love the Lord. Our affections have been changed. And so again, when we look at all the different major world religions, it's do, accepted. Christianity reverses that. It's you've been accepted and now go and do. And again, I find that fascinating. Of all the religions in the world, this is what sets Christianity apart. Now, when we get to the book of Colossians, we're going to notice in the first chapter that Paul uses this term firstborn. It can kind of catch us off guard because we begin to think of it like a firstborn child. And so we ask the question, was Jesus created? Because this is what some religions believe and hold to, that Jesus was a created being. But we need to remember the context of what Paul is writing here in chapter 1 of Colossians. So he will say of Jesus that he is the image of the invisible God. Also, he says that Jesus created all things. And so when we just look at that part of what Paul is saying in chapter 1, we come to the conclusion that Jesus is God and also that Jesus created all things. Also, when we look at other letters of Paul, such as in Titus and Romans, Paul will very clearly state that Jesus is God. And so when we step back and look at that, again, it's very clear that Jesus is not created. So why does Paul use that term firstborn? And he uses it in two ways. He says Jesus is the firstborn of creation, and then Jesus is the firstborn among the dead. Well, let's start with that first one, the firstborn of creation. And so it helps to think through that of a king, and a king has a son. And this son will one day rise to the throne and rule everything. And so this is what Paul is pointing to. Really the main theme throughout Colossians is that Jesus is the preeminent one. And so Jesus is the Lord of the universe. He's created all things are for him, and he rules today. Now, when we get to that phrase, firstborn among the dead, what Paul means here is that Jesus is creating a new humanity. So let's think back to the Old Testament, particularly in Genesis, where we see the firstborn who was the founder of a new people. So we saw this over and over again in the early parts of Genesis, that the firstborn would create this people and that people. And so what Paul is saying is that Jesus is the founder of a new people. Because of his life, death, and resurrection, he has redeemed us, and he is creating this new redeemed community. And so when we step back and look at this great first chapter, we see that Jesus is the preeminent one, that he is the Lord of the universe, and that he is creating a new people. He is the founder of a new people that will be in heaven with the Lord for all time. Well, I want to ask you this question as we think of Jesus being the preeminent one. Does he take first place in your life? Is he the preeminent one for you? Are you living in such a way that he is first place? That's a good way that we need to think through Colossians, where we don't just learn about who Jesus is, but also apply it to our life. Well, I think you're really going to enjoy the reading this week. I know the Lord will bless you in it.